Mr. Speaker, the triple lock was a Conservative policy.
Starmer can't avoid them forever. He is going to have to, at some point, deal up to them.
There's no disparity. There's no right wing, left wing anymore. It's shit.
As Prime Minister Keir Starmer takes his place, the House of Commons is in a tense state preparing for what seems to be a confrontational session. The nation has seen rising inflation, stalled wages, and households struggle with ever-rising living expenses. One of Starmer's most famous campaign commitments was not to increase taxes for working people, more especially to freeze council tax so that households wouldn't feel even more burden. Still, it is becoming more and more evident that council tax is rising everywhere. Ready to attack, Kemi Badenoch searches the previous remarks of the Prime Minister for inconsistencies. She is resolved to make him answerable for what she describes as a shameful betrayal of voters. Public polls have indeed shown growing dissatisfaction with Starmer's alleged violated promises, which calls into doubt his trustworthiness. With both MPs involved in a rhetorical war over tax increases, a faltering economy, and the Prime Minister's frayed assurances, the setting is set for a sharp back and forth. Make sure to like and subscribe for more.
Mr. Speaker, she asked what we're doing. We're clearing up the mess that they left. We're dealing with global instability, and we recognise the pressures that are bearing down on businesses and individuals and working people.
Roman, describe Keir Starmer in one word.
Keir Starmer. Dull.
Badenoch sets the tone by noting that Conservative policy was behind the triple lock on pensions, formerly praised as a great protection for seniors. She contrasts that with Starmer's initiatives to support everything from social spending to pay increases as if he developed these policies. For Starmer, it's a direct hit as he had tried to project himself as a Prime Minister who values financial stability of elderly people. Now obliged to admit the sources of the triple lock, he runs the danger of appearing to be co-opting ideas instead of developing his own. Starmer's face stiffens beneath the careful inspection of the House. The Prime Minister responds by stressing past Tory mistakes, but it sounds as though this is a premeditated deflection. Viewers see that if he cannot firmly answer who wrote the triple lock, how can he clearly address the more fundamental question of why he betrayed his promise to keep council tax under control?
Well, Mr. Speaker, she says the triple lock was Conservative policy. It was once thought to be the party of sound finances, but they blew all of that. Mr. Speaker, she asked what we're doing. We're clearing up the mess that they left.
He has betrayed every single one of his election promises and disempowered the grassroots of the party.
Badenoch turns to a different but linked grievance, Starmer's so-called jobs tax. She notes that from Sunday, a rise in national insurance, effectively a levy on firms and employees, will drive many companies to either lower salaries, reduce staff, or hike consumer prices. Making this point, she implies Starmer is punishing the same people he swore to defend. For a Prime Minister who ran on helping small businesses and working people, this is a stinging punch. Starmer attempts to deflect by citing world headwinds, but it does not change the fact that for many small business owners, the cost increase is too great to handle. Critics claim Starmer broke his repeated promise not to raise taxes on working people. This national insurance increases is regarded as punishing employees just as hard as employers, therefore further erasing earnings.
From Sunday, Labour's jobs tax will mean many British businesses face a terrible choice: to cut wages, put up prices, or sack their staff. What is the Prime Minister's advice to those businesses?
But Starmer's biggest weakness is related to council tax, a municipal levy that can rapidly become a hot-button issue for fixed-income households. Starmer dared to promise to freeze it during the election. Still, folks all across see bills mounting as they land in mailboxes. Badenoch grabs the opportunity and hammers the Prime Minister for allowing additional financial load to fall on average homes. Clearly nervous, Starmer attempts to shift blame for financial anarchy on the previous government. He also says local authorities make independent decisions. This does not, however, escape the clear fact that he vowed not to increase council tax, yet it is rising. The Birmingham meltdown, where trash piles among a council crisis, showcases even more how false Starmer's freeze pledge is. Voters even in Labour strongholds feel let down.
Before the election, election, he pledged to freeze council tax. Instead, it's going up everywhere, even in Birmingham, where there's 17,000 tons of rubbish uncollected on the streets. Does the Prime Minister regret promising the British people he would freeze their council tax when he has so obviously failed?
Starmer tries to negotiate in the heated argument. He praises his proposal to increase the national living pay by £1,400, restates that inflation under the Tories surged, and issues a warning about global instability. These arguments may have some truth, but they ignore the direct issue of why council tax isn't being frozen. Viewed as a rhetorical turn, Starmer's approach overcomes an unkept promise with tangential policy successes. But the strategy does not appeal to the public or backbenchers either. People watch their monthly outgoings increasing, and Starmer's vague references to past governments or cost of living difficulties do not help to allay actual concerns about local taxes rising sharply.
We're dealing with global instability, and we recognise the pressures that are bearing down on businesses and individuals and working people.
Badenoch focuses on Birmingham, where 17,000 tonnes of uncollected trash line the streets. She writes of it as a Labour-made disaster, more than just a local accident. Although Starmer seeks to attribute responsibility to local administration, some contend this disaster reflects the collapse of public services under his direction. How can he make a national vow to keep taxes down if he cannot oversee rubbish collecting in a big city under a Labour council? Badenoch presents a bleak picture, a once thriving city drowning in garbage, a clear emblem of poor government. Starmer agrees the situation is awful, but viewers point out he provides minimal in terms of actual remedies, except for general comments on support and major incident announcements.
Kemi Badenoch.
Mr. Speaker, he doesn't want to talk about Birmingham, and that's because he knows the situation. So I'll say it again. 17,000 tonnes of rubbish on Birmingham streets. Normally, a state of emergency is called for natural disasters, not Labour ones.
Badenoch's questioning of whether Starmer can follow his own financial guidelines marks still another devastating moment. He hems and haws, circling the issue and suggesting that should growth fail, he may have to raise taxes more. Viewers see this as a near admission that all his advocacy of preserving the current tax system is unstable. Given how council tax already broke his promise, many believe national insurance or other taxes would rise next. Critics point to this as evidence Starmer lacks a defined strategy. He is trapped by rules but also into large expenditure. Something needs to give, and the Prime Minister's silence to explain just feeds rumours.
Mr. Speaker, the whole House would have heard that he didn't say whether or not he could keep his fiscal rules.
Rising interest rates and a cost of living crisis force Starmer to rethink his position. He uses the OBR's projection of more future growth to try to rescue it. He says the Tories left an economic mess, whereas he's the steady hand raising Britain. Still, there is plenty of doubt. Earnings fall short of actual expenses, inflation is still biting, and the new taxes proposed by the Prime Minister severely affect households. Critics find it contradictory. How can Starmer boast about national living wage, increases, and sound finances, while neglecting the direct impact council tax has on household bills? Especially for those who have to pay more every month, the rhetorical flourish seems empty.
Up, 2029 up. And thanks to our planning reforms, the largest growth measure the OBR have ever costed. And what did the Tories do when the bill came before Parliament? They abstained.
Critics of the Prime Minister point to a startling resemblance to past Conservative regimes. Starmer previously praised for imposing harsh policies on common people. Now confronted with mounting debt and a sick NHS, he has now moved to increasing national insurance and allowing local authorities to impose greater council rates. His phrasing of these policies, citing need, global forces or progressive ends, may vary, but the consequence is the same. Working families bear more of the load. Badenoch emphasises the irony of Starmer repeating what he used to criticise by referring to average Labour voters now battered by tax rises.
From Sunday, Labour's jobs tax will mean many British businesses face a terrible choice: to cut wages, put up prices or sack their staff.
I beg you, Keir Starmer, if you think that an £18 million penthouse is necessary for your child to complete his GCSEs while you're campaigning, why do you not think it's necessary for disabled people to have up to £761 or so to focus on surviving, paying their access needs, paying for mobility aid? Do you think that disabled people don't deserve the bare fucking minimum to be able to pay their living costs in a country that is despicably ableist?
One of the most interesting events occurs when Starmer charges Tories of not implementing several development initiatives. He has, however, also a history of not undoing Tory budget decisions he formerly felt unfair. This conflicting posture emphasises how the Prime Minister battles to preserve ideological purity in face of the actual limitations of government. To seem more consistent, he tries to manipulate votes in Parliament. Yet, the public quickly recognises the double standard. Local community organisations, meantime, are not impressed. He promised to freeze council tax and it's going up, and no fancy parliamentary votes can justify that broken pledge, they say.
Well, you don't grow the economy or build houses by yourself. They're the same old party, they haven't changed, nothing's new.
Starmer claims at one point wages are going up faster than prices, but many households disagree that allegation, blasted by numerous hits like winter fuel bill spikes, greater NI contributions, and now council tax. Some economists point out that real earnings remain limited, particularly for middle-class workers who must pay local taxes but are not receiving significant salary increases. The happy spin of the Prime Minister cannot cover the immediate squeeze on household budgets and take-home pay. Union leaders also wonder why, if Starmer is really pro-Labour, his continuing actions seem to be reminiscent of Osborne-like austerity.
That's why we're rolling up our sleeves. And yesterday, Mr. Speaker, I was pleased to announce the national living wage increasing by £1,400.
Starmer deals with the danger of US tariffs on British automobiles as if the crisis over local taxes and salaries weren't enough. Kemi Badenoch points out that the Prime Minister failed to protect a previously agreed-upon agreement, therefore compromising the automotive industry. She compares the record of Starmer with billions of investment deals the Tories formerly obtained from big manufacturers BMW, Nissan, Jaguar, Land Rover, suggesting he's done little to safeguard a vital British sector. Starmer, floundering, says, "Constructive talks are ongoing, but cannot promise no further tax increases or employment losses." Critics contend it's another proof he lacks knowledge on both domestic taxation and world trade.
Labour's record is a car industry in crisis, even before tariffs. There are 25,000 more jobs now at risk.
Starmer describes his attitude to possible tariffs as a calm, pragmatic approach. He maintains he won't rule anything out, a remark that sounds more like hesitation than clear leadership. Viewers remember how Starmer promised to be open and direct while constantly complaining that the previous government was too chaotic. Still, his position on trade deals or tariffs is hardly clearer now. He talks of ongoing negotiations and intangible synergy, but he leaves many MPs on both sides disappointed by his vague remarks.
We're taking a calm, pragmatic approach and keeping our feet on the ground. There are constructive talks that are ongoing on a wider economic prosperity deal with the US. That is really important at this moment.
Badenoch hammered on her central point. Starmer is essentially raising taxes on the very families he promised to spare. The session closes. She combines the reality of households paying more bills with the Prime Minister's earlier remarks, vowing to keep council tax stable. The cost of living crisis obscures the attempts of the Prime Minister to boast about higher earnings or growth projections. Trust in Starmer's integrity is decreasing, poll watchers see. Having run out of fresh ideas, some backbench Labour MPs secretly complain that he is using old Conservative techniques.
People are getting poorer. Before the election, he pledged to freeze council tax. Instead, it's going up everywhere.
Disillusionment increases outside of Westminster. Voters who once felt Starmer embodied a fresh, progressive approach see him caught in the same rhetoric the Tories used, boasting about massive spending while implementing covert taxes. Local authorities struggle under the twin weight of limited finances and complex new expectations in meanwhile. Communities object at paying more for less. Starmer's comments to tidying up the Tories' mess no longer have influence over them. After all, how can they believe him on more important matters like securing growth, controlling inflation, or providing crucial services if he cannot maintain a simple promise like freezing council tax?
A fantasy figure is about as much use as Liz Truss's economic planning.
Kemi Badenoch's line of inquiry exposes a Prime Minister caught in his own inconsistent posture in the last analysis. Once outspoken about removing austerity, Starmer now oversees increasing municipal taxes and an unpopular jobs tax. He once singled out the Tories for excessive prices, but inflation still hurts. He used to mock large rhetorical gambits, but nowadays he's promoting calm approaches and constructive talks with scant explanation. The disaster in Birmingham, with mounds of garbage and declared emergencies, captures how local government under Labour has collapsed, and how empty Starmer's promises are. His comments on health financing or pay increases cannot hide the obvious truth. He promised no tax increases on working people, particularly no council tax increase, but has delivered exactly the reverse. For those paying the bills, the failed promise is sufficient evidence that the Prime Minister's words have no value. Should Starmer fail to resolve these contradictions, the unrest in Parliament might find its way into the electorate and expose him to the identical criticism he used against the Tories, and a nation where he is seen as just another politician pledging something he cannot maintain.